Today is Monday, August 18th. We'll tell you about some of the most powerful leaders in the world coming to America's capital today as President Trump suggests new terms to end the war in Ukraine. Also, where Hurricane Erin is expected to impact late summer travelers this week, and why hundreds of protests happened across the U.S. over the weekend. Plus, how one conservative state is trying to identify liberal teachers, how much money AT&T customers could be entitled to in a new settlement, and how Scottie Scheffler completed a feat no other golfer has pulled off since Tiger Woods. Those stories and even more news to know coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin seem to have found some common ground at last week's summit. Over the weekend, Trump backed Putin's plan for peace, based on Ukraine handing over territory to Russia. Specifically, reports say Trump is now pushing for the Ukrainian side to give up the entire Donbas region in eastern Ukraine, even areas not already occupied by Russian troops. Last night on social media, Trump also called for Ukraine to give up on Crimea that was illegally annexed more than a decade ago. And in return, Russia would pause the war at its current front lines. Trump is expected to bring this up today with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky when he visits the White House. The leaders of France, Germany, Italy, Britain, Finland, and the European Union are also coming to the U.S. today to meet with Trump. The hope is they'll show a united front as they push back against Russia. But what Trump says he'll concede to Russia goes against what the other leaders have said they would allow. The Trump administration says one major focus of today's talks is security guarantees for Ukraine that could be similar to the one with NATO, where an enemy attack against one member is viewed as an attack against all. But so far, the exact details have not been hashed out. And to be clear, Trump says Ukraine should not actually become a NATO member. Trump also stopped demanding the urgent ceasefire that he insisted upon before Friday's meeting with Putin under the threat of more sanctions. But Ukraine's president still says that's his top priority. So, to be continued. The Trump administration has eased up a little bit on its Washington, D.C. takeover. After the city sued the federal government, both sides decided to reach a deal. Under terms of this new agreement, the Washington, D.C. police chief will stay in power after all, instead of the head of the DEA. But the Trump administration will still be able to use city police officers for federal purposes on an emergency basis. Meanwhile, everyone in Washington, D.C. is seeing a significant show of force. There are officers from the FBI, DEA, DHS, ATF, U.S. Marshals, and U.S. Park Police all patrolling the city, as well as National Guard troops. In fact, over the weekend, South Carolina, Ohio, and West Virginia announced they would send hundreds of their troops to join those already mobilized in the nation's capital. Officials have also been clearing out several homeless encampments, and more sweeps are expected. Stay tuned. The U.S. State Department decided to end all visitor visas for people from Gaza. The announcement came just one day after conspiracy theorist Laura Loomer posted videos on social media of children from Gaza arriving in the U.S. for medical treatment, questioning how they got their visas. After that, the Trump administration apparently got several questions about it. Even though, to be clear, the Palestinians only came to the U.S. for medical care, not to be resettled as refugees. And the deal was always that they would return to the Middle East after they were treated. Either way, the State Department says it's pausing that program and reevaluating how visas are being vetted. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is actually calling for more medical evacuations from Gaza. But that UN health agency is also calling for a ceasefire, saying, quote, peace is the best medicine. By the way, the Israeli government is facing even more pressure from within its own country. Over the weekend, Israel saw one of the largest protests in the nearly 2 years of war. Hundreds of thousands of people took part, demanding a deal to end the war and free the hostages still being held by Hamas terrorists. But for now, peace seems far off. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's against any resolution that leaves Hamas in power, saying that puts Israel at risk of further attacks. And Hamas does not appear ready to lay down its arms. So at this point, the plan is still for Israel to expand the military offensive, and that's expected to happen soon. Well, back in the U.S., tens of thousands of Americans protested around the country. They held hundreds of rallies to protest the push for Texas and other red states to redraw their congressional maps in favor of Republicans. As we've told you before, Texas Democrats kept their state's new map from coming to a vote during a special session. But the state's governor immediately called a second session. So Texas Republicans are planning to move forward on their redrawn map today. California lawmakers are also set to take up their proposal for a map to add Democratic seats to retaliate, and more states could still do the same in the weeks ahead. Hurricane Erin became one of the fastest, rapidly intensifying storms in the history of the Atlantic Ocean. As of early this morning, it's a Category 3 storm with sustained winds of 125 miles an hour as it churns through the ocean north of the Caribbean. But over the weekend, it went from a Category 1 to a Category 5 hurricane in just a matter of hours. It brought damaging winds and flooding rain to much of the Caribbean. Ports were closed, flights were canceled, and power went out. And even though Erin has since been downgraded, it could strengthen again. The storm is expected to pass east of the Turks and Caicos Islands and southeast Bahamas this morning. For now, it's not expected to make a direct hit on land, but it could double or even triple in size. And it's expected to have a life-threatening impact on American beaches, with dangerous rip currents across the south today and up to northeast coastal areas later in the week. All right, we have more news for you still ahead. But first, a quick break to thank our sponsor. When it comes to skincare, I want products that do more than just moisturize. I want them to really support my skin long-term. And that's why I turned to OneSkin. I started with their face and eye formulas, and they quickly became part of my everyday routine. The texture feels great, the ingredients are science-backed, and I love knowing they're working at the cellular level to keep my skin looking and feeling healthy. And now I've been using their OS1 Hair Scalp Serum too, because caring for your scalp is skincare. And for me, it's about giving my hair the best chance to stay strong, healthy, and thick as I get older. In fact, OneSkin scientists did a clinical study showing that after 6 months, participants had significantly thicker and denser hair. It's the same innovation powering their skincare, now used for hair. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using the code NEWSWORTHY at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with the code NEWSWORTHY. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support our show and tell them we sent you. Now, back to the news. An early version of the government's highly anticipated health policy report came out over the weekend. Several news outlets got a look at the draft and found it actually does not call on the government to make significant changes to its food or farming policies. That's seen as a disappointment to many health and environmental activists. But it's also a relief for American industries, who will likely face pressure to create change, but not new laws. The draft report mostly calls on the government to further study chronic diseases, bad air quality, Americans' diets, and prescription drug use. It also refers to plans to boost fertility rates and get whole milk into public schools. The parts about vaccines are pretty vague, just saying things like how the Trump administration wants to make sure Americans have the best vaccination schedule. It also points to revised dietary guidelines without saying what they are just yet. Of course, the draft still could see some changes before it's finalized, so we'll keep you updated. Oklahoma has started giving tests to teachers to identify any they deem too woke to teach kids. The tests include questions about the biological differences between males and females, as well as Christianity and American history. It comes as Oklahoma has seen an influx of about 500 new teachers this year. They were attracted in part by a signing bonus program meant to deal with a teacher shortage. Well, since then, the head of Oklahoma schools says he's concerned with some opposing views he's noticed from the teachers moving from blue states. So he says the new tests will weed out teachers who just want to warp children's minds into becoming social warriors. But teachers' unions have criticized these new tests, saying they're a political move that will discourage teachers from coming to Oklahoma. For now, the tests are only mandatory for teachers from New York and California who want to work in Oklahoma. But newcomers from up to 8 other states may still be added. School begins for many Oklahoma school districts today. Air Canada is facing a crisis. As expected, flight attendants walked off the job over the weekend and planes were grounded. The Canadian government tried to step in and order they return to work, but the union is asking a court to block that government order. And until a court weighs in one way or another, it's telling workers to stay on strike. The flight attendants and airline have been locked in negotiations for months, with pay being a main sticking point. And now they seem no closer to a deal. Air Canada typically serves about 130,000 passengers every day and operates nearly 200 flights to the U.S. each day. The airline says it's working to rebook passengers on different airlines. Refunds and credits are also available. A new deal with AT&T means customers could be entitled to thousands of dollars. Overall, the company is paying $177 million in a class action settlement related to data breaches. In the first incident last year, customers' data was exposed on the dark web, including addresses, social security numbers, birthdays, phone numbers, and more. Now, the 73 million customers impacted can claim up to $5,000 each. A second data breach last year involved hackers illegally downloading AT&T data from a third-party cloud platform. That breach exposed call and text records for almost all of AT&T's cellular customers. Those people can now claim up to $2,500. But in both cases, customers will have to prove they lost something from the breaches. Plus, you have to fill out an online form. We've added a link to that form in today's episode notes. The world's #1 golfer solidified his place on the top of the PGA Tour. Scottie Scheffler won the BMW Championship over the weekend. That was his 5th PGA Tour title of the year. And since he pulled the same thing off last year, that makes him the first player since Tiger Woods to win at least 5 times on the tour in consecutive years. And this time he did it by coming from behind in the final pairing. Scheffler actually has 18 career titles in the last 3.5 years, and he's not done yet. Next up, he's headed to Tour Championship with a chance to become the first repeat FedEx Cup champion. That's it for the main news, so now it's time for Money Monday, when we talk about one interesting money-related news story. But first, this episode is sponsored by Cook Unity. Dinner can easily become a struggle between something healthy or something fast, but Cook Unity lets me have both. I've enjoyed a tangy Parmesan-crusted tilapia and a Mediterranean grilled shrimp grain bowl with bright, fresh flavors. They give me flavors and nutrition that I couldn't, or at least wouldn't, make on my own. And each one felt like a chef-prepared dish, because they were. Cook Unity is not a meal kit. These are ready-to-eat meals freshly made by award-winning chefs, delivered straight to your door. So you just heat them up in minutes. I appreciated the variety, too. With over 300 meals that rotate weekly, there is always something new to try. And since you can filter by cuisine, protein, or dietary need in the app, it's easy to match whatever you're craving. Plus, every ingredient tastes fresh and balanced. It's an easy way to eat well without feeling like you're making sacrifices or spending a ton of time. Fuel your day with the freshest, best-tasting meal delivery made by award-winning chefs. Go to cookunity.com/newsworthyfree or enter code newsworthyfree before checkout for free premium meals for life. That's free premium meals for life by using code newsworthyfree or going to cookunity.com/newsworthyfree. Now, back to Money Monday. We hear a lot about the importance of adult friendships, but at what cost? A new survey from Ally Bank says most millennials and Gen Z, aka Zoomers, believe social lives are too expensive. Still, more than 40% admitted to overspending on activities with friends a few months out of the year, and 20% say financial or lifestyle differences have contributed to a friendship ending. The survey polled 1,000 people from 18 to 44 years old. They reported spending on average about $250 every month on activities with friends. Those include dinners and drinks out and splashy celebrations that many people believe are worth the cost. As the New York Post puts it, a good chunk of young adults would rather be funless than friendless. Still, Ally does have some advice for anyone who's worried about the friends versus finances dilemma. The bank's head of money wellness suggests being honest and openly discussing money with friends, since that can open up conversations about more affordable ways to hang out. Plus, he says the best friend is the one who respects your financial situation, no matter what it is. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your support of the show. We'll be back with even more news to know tomorrow. For now, have a great day.